Greyzone Warfare, as of yesterday, has launched into early access for the public, which means you can get your hands on this game as well. And from playing this game in the Create a Closed playtests and yesterday, which was launch day for Greyzone Warfare, I have come to the conclusion that this game is not very well optimized at all. But that being said, people are moaning and review bombing the game and having like a 7-8-year-old computer and complaining that they're not getting 80-90 FPS while having their graphics all set to max. So, you know me, I'm pretty good with graphics settings in games like Tarkov. This is no exception. I've done a deep dive in all the settings to make sure that I've got the best settings for you guys on a mix of all systems, which allows you to get more FPS and not too much of a degradation on your visuals and your fidelity. So we're gonna just talk about what I'm getting at the minute. My system's running a 3090 and a Ryzen 5950X, so a pretty high-end system still, and I'm getting anywhere between 125 to 150 frames per second in the game. And I've tried it on multiple different systems with 20 series, a low-end 30 series and a 40 series, and it is improving FPS from having it set to high for about 40 or 50, sometimes even 60 frames. So let's go into our settings and talk about what you can do yourself. So the first thing, make sure your windowed mode is set to full screen and your display resolution is set to your native resolution. Full screen gives you less input lag. Display resolution, obviously, if you're playing on a 1440p monitor, you're going to want to get yourself on 1440p, otherwise everything's going to start to look hazy. However, if you do have a really crappy old system, then you can downscale one stop. So downscale to 1080p from 1440. Don't go from 4K to 1080p because that will look a mess. But downscale one stop shouldn't look terrible, and it should help your performance quite a bit. My FOV, personal preference, VSync is off. Again, brightness, contrast, saturation and all that is set at 100. I didn't change any of that. My frame rate limit is set to unlimited, but if you are noticing a really unstable frame rate, I'd recommend dipping it and limiting it at something like your monitor's native refresh rate, which for me is 165 Hz, so 165 FPS. And then for the frame limit in the background, just set that at 30 FPS or the lowest it will go, because when the game's running in the background, you don't need it to be churning through your system and running at unlimited frames. Now, the main settings, quality. We're going to turn this down to low for quality presets because it will then allow us to change less of the settings. We're still going to change some of them, but it will change less of them overall. So if you change quality presets to low, then 3D resolution, this is already controlled, so this will be grayed out. Ignore this completely. Global illumination, we're going to set that to low, and as you can see on any of these settings, you can see a slight description of what it actually does. So if I turn it to epic, do you guys see much of a difference from epic to low? This is a great thing about having it still running live in the background. If you're in a game and you're in your base, you can actually see the difference happening live, but there is no real difference, and it hogs the FPS. Basically, it just bounces light around more, and we don't need to worry about the ambient occlusion or anything like that. It's basically ray tracing, but the game looks pretty good anyway, even on low. Shallow quality is set to high because the difference between the shadows on medium and low, as you can see when you set it to high, the shadows are a lot brighter, which means you can see people in the shadows a lot easier. Texture resolution set to medium. There isn't too much of a difference between medium and high, but you will notice difference between low and medium, especially on things closer up. So I've got mine set to medium. That's pretty good. If you do want to drop it too low because your system's struggling, then that's fine as well. Effects quality, reflections quality and foliage quality all set to low. You'd think I'd have foliage set up a bit, but just with how much grass and how much trees, as you can see, it does make them look a little nicer and the trees look brighter, but with just how many trees and how far the rendering distance is on them, it just really hogs FPS. So I have this set to low. It doesn't really bother me. The trees still look pretty good. Now, time for post-processing. So motion blur, depth of field, bloom and all that, I've got that set to medium, but you can turn it down to low. As you can see, it brightens up the edges of your screen as well. Motion blur, off. We don't want to be sick. Sharpening, again, personal preference. I've got mine set to 40. If you crank it all the way up, it starts to look a bit like bacon. Crank it all the way down, bit too blurry for me. So mine's just set at a nice round 40. Now I've actually got a colorblind mode set, and again, this is completely personal preference. My colorblind mode is Protonope, and it's set to a strength of 3 out of 10. As you can see, it changes the colors quite a bit. I've got more of a tan tint to the world now, rather than it being very white. It's now got an orange hue. Makes it look more like a summer's day. You can actually see people a little easier, because as you can see, this guy that stands over here by the helicopter landing zone, you can see he's a lot darker than the environment. And as you can see in some other locations, like off for example, his outfit, you can actually see it's brightening up a little bit more. So Protonope, that's where I like to be. And then the strength for 3 is pretty good. I don't need it any higher than that. Now we can go to advanced, and this is where you're going to see a big difference in your FPS. So if you're not using a 40 series card, turn your anti-aliasing on to FSR. FSR, okay? If you're using a 40 series card, turn it on to DLSS. Just like that. And you'll notice that a dip for me on a 3090 DLSS, let me just apply the changes here. 55 frames, there you go, 56, 65 up the top there, 67, and I'm looking out into the world now, so this is out into the island. As you can see, I'm looking into the island. If I turn on FSR instead of DLSS, and this is with a 3090 by the way, it doesn't change the looks terribly, and this is with the quality preset. It's gone to well over 100. Well recommend turning this on even if you're not utilizing AMD completely. It really works well. It makes the game a whole lot smoother. It basically doubled my FPS there. And then back to it. If we go all the way down, so FSR is turned on for me. All of these are grayed out because we've turned on FSR. The only thing you're going to want to look at now is low latency. I've got that set on. And then Fidelity FX frame generation. This uses AI to give you additional frames. I've turned it on. It works quite nicely. And then super resolution I've got set to quality. So it renders fewer pixels and uses AI to generate a higher resolution image. Set to quality, but you can see a difference between native AA and quality. As you can see, native AA is a lot crisper. There is a jump in performance, obviously. The lower you go, the better the performance, but the worse it looks. So make sure you pick what's right for you here. If you've got a nice, decent system, but you still want to get decent frames, stick with quality or native AA. If you've got a medium system, balanced. If you've got a lower end system, performance. It's as simple as that. So as you can see, native AA is dropped down by 20 FPS compared to quality. So that's why mine for Fidelity FX super resolution was set to quality and not the native AA. And as you can see, just like that, we've doubled our frames. The game still looks good. You can spot people a mile off. The game plays smooth, other than the server rubber banding issues that we're getting at the minute. But day one hotfix came out. They're only going forward. And yeah, it's promising. And once you've got your settings down, this game is a much more enjoyable experience. Even when you're flying in for the first time in a session, you're not dipping frames in your helicopter. Usually when you're flying out from base camp for the first time, your frames really do dip. And they still do, but just nowhere near as much. So I hope this video, this nice quick settings guide, was helpful. It usually is for the guys that have watched my Tarkov content before. I hope I've done this game justice as well. If you've noticed anything extra other than the obvious, like updating your graphics drivers and Windows versions and all of that sort of stuff, let me know down below in the comments. I'll be looking forward to having a conversation with you down there. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.